Hey guys, it's Annalise from Triami. I just want to sit down today and answer a few questions that you may have about this channel and Instagram and have you guys get to know me a little bit better. So I was actually introduced into triathlons back in 2016, shortly after I graduated from high school. We went to Wisconsin for my graduation party where all my extended family lives, and my uncle invited myself and some of my other family members to do a sprint triathlon up there as a relay team. So my uncle, brother, and I were on one team. My sister, aunt, and mom were on the other team. I did the swim leg of the race because I was a swimmer in middle school and high school. So it's kind of obvious for me to do that leg, and it was a lot of fun. And I didn't think about it much after that. I went to and did my first 2 years of college, and it was kind of in an in-between point between being accepted into nursing school and finishing my prerequisites for nursing school, and sort of felt a little bit lost. Didn't feel like I was really doing anything with my life. Didn't really have a ton of friends, and just figured I needed to do something. Kind of revisited the idea of triathlons, knowing that I didn't have a bike and I didn't really know how to run, and swimming was about the only thing that I knew how to do. So I signed up for my first race that was going to be in October of that year. It was sometime in the summer, and just decided to do it. You know, speaking about swimming, that is actually my strongest leg of a triathlon, and it's my favorite to compete in. I actually get really upset that it's the shortest leg of a race. But it's where I'm the most confident. I really enjoy the swim, open water or in a pool. It doesn't really bother me either way, which is kind of abnormal because for a lot of people the swim is their weak point. But I think growing up as a swimmer competitively in middle school and then for part of high school as well, I just kind of grew that natural confidence in the water. Moving into more race-specific questions, I wanted to just talk about my favorite race that I've done this far, and it had to be 70.3 Worlds in St. George, Utah. It was definitely my most challenging race. It was so hard, very hilly, both the bike and the run. The swim was beautiful, but it was really cool. So all the women competed on Friday and all the men competed on Saturday. My dad was able to come out to the race and support me, which meant a lot. And having all the women surrounding you while you're racing and it just being only females was really cool. And then having the men on the sideline supporting you, and then vice versa on Saturday, all the women supporting the men, was a really neat opportunity to be out there. And it was my first world championship. So having that large of an age group that I was competing against made it really memorable. That race was definitely the most challenging race that I've had to prepare for thus far because it was the furthest away and it was the longest that I've ever spent at a race site. So just making sure that I had everything packed. I did a lot of pre-race visualization when I was packing, when I was on the plane, when I got to the race site, when I was checking in. It was just constantly running through my head how my race was going to look like, and just trying to think as positively as I could, knowing that some things can happen that are out of my control, and just being the best that I could prepared for it. Thankfully, it was such a big race that if something did end up going wrong, there's plenty of bike support, run support, and people surrounding you, and that if you needed some extra support on the course or before the race, it was there to help you. So for me, my average week of training may look a little bit different than the person who works a 9 to 5 because I do work 3 12-hour shifts a week at the hospital. Usually it ends up being about 4 to 5 days of pretty intense swim, bike, and run training, and then a day of strength training and a day off. I have to sort of modify those days every week just depending on what I'm working and how my shifts were. But I'm lucky enough to have a coach who sort of writes a plan for me, and it's pretty flexible on what days I can do which activities. I think starting out in triathlons can be really intimidating because you have the race distance from a sprint all the way to a full Ironman. It may feel like you just need to go out and compete a full Ironman, which some people do. For me personally, I started out with a few sprints, kind of led into Olympic distance, and then just this past year started competing in half Ironmans. The best piece of advice that I could give to someone just starting out in triathlons would be to find a local race as your first race to do. It doesn't have to be, but for me, I found it really motivating because my family could be there supporting me. It wasn't as far, so if I forgot something, there was the option to turn back home and go get what I needed. And being familiar with the area that I was staying in was much more comforting than going to a whole new state. I also think remembering that you don't need the fanciest piece of equipment to race in. When I first started, I had my mom's bike, a $25 pair of triathlon shorts, a Lululemon sports bra, and I threw on a tank top for the bike and the run. I didn't have anything fancy. I didn't really know if I was going to stick with triathlons when I first got started. And so now slowly working my way up to nicer equipment, knowing that I'm going to stay with it is fine. Don't feel like just because you go to a race and you see people with the fanciest bikes that you need to go ahead and compete in that. You know, I find that setting goals can be really crucial to keeping someone motivated to continue racing. At the beginning of every season, I actually sit down with my coach over the phone and we kind of plan out my race season to figure out what races are going to be feasible for me to do that year, and kind of set a big goal for the end of the season. So last year it was that I really wanted to complete an Ironman 70.3, and my big goal was that I really wanted to earn a spot to go to the World Championships, and I actually ended up achieving both those goals, which was surprising. I think that it's important to set realistic goals, but also to have at least one big goal a season that you would really like to achieve, but you're okay with not achieving. It kind of motivates you even further. Never thought that I would be able to qualify for the World Championships my first year competing in 70.3 races, and I did. My big goal for next year, and kind of working towards this season to getting my times a little bit lower and being sure that I'll qualify for New Zealand in 2024. That's a huge goal, and it might not be realistic for some people, but I think that it's important to set at least one big goal a season just to see what you're capable of achieving. I definitely find that the off season is the hardest time for me to stay motivated, just because I don't have any races that I'm looking forward to, and it's a really kind of lonely time when you're not surrounded by triathletes. To sort of combat that, I like to go out and run with friends, or find a bike group in the area, or kind of train in different ways by hiking or finding a new place to train. It sort of gives me that time to do it, when during the season I don't always have the time to do it, and I'm kind of running the same routes and biking the same routes and swimming in the same pools. The off season is a really good time to go and explore new areas, and then be able to use those new areas in your next season. For me personally, I'm very competitive, so I find it really hard sometimes to balance having fun at triathlons while also staying competitive. Statewide, I'm probably a top 3 athlete. Regionally, I'm in the top 20, and I would say nationally, I'm in the top 100. It can definitely be frustrating at the national and world level races when I'm placing 40 or 50th in my age group, or sometimes even lower than that. But I have to remember that's a very large pool of athletes. It's much larger than my local race, where there's only 3 to 5 athletes in my age group. And kind of keeping that in mind, and more so going back and comparing my times and making sure that as long as my times are getting faster or comparable to what they were last year, that I'm getting better as an athlete, and sometimes it's all that matters. I hope you guys enjoyed getting to know me a little bit. I look forward to growing this channel and making it a positive space for all triathletes to come and hopefully find a little bit of motivation.